She sent the message at 4:47 a.m. The soft glow of her phone illuminated her tired face as she typed. Your son has no milk. There was a pause before she hit send, a hesitation that betrayed years of fear and heartache. Her fingers trembled not from the cold, though it seeped through the thin walls of her apartment, but from the knowledge that the man she had once loved and lost, the one she had begged to stay, now carried a name heavy with infamy, the name of a Mafia boss. And she was sending him a message about the child she had hidden from him for 3 long years. The city slept under a blanket of rain, streets gleaming with reflections of neon lights, silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Yet her tiny apartment was alive with tension. She watched her baby stir, the soft coos echoing in the quiet room. His little hand reached for the bottle she had run out of, and her chest tightened. How had it come to this? That she had to reach out to the man whose gaze once made her feel both safe and terrified. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. The message wasn't a typical text. It wasn't warm, nor curious, it was commanding where her heart skipped. That single word carried the weight of a man who ruled empires with fear and precision. The same man whose hands had once been gentle enough to cradle her tears. She typed back, her fingers moving faster than her heart could bear. Apartment on 7th Avenue, Unit 12. Please hurry. She added the ellipsis out of habit, a small plea for mercy, though she knew he didn't do mercy. Within minutes, the sound of tires splashing through wet streets filled her ears. She held her son tighter, a mix of fear and anticipation making her dizzy. When the knock finally came, she hesitated, knowing that behind that door stood a man who could destroy her world with a glance, yet was also the only one who could save the child she had brought into this unforgiving world. The door swung open, and there he was. Dominic Romano, the name that had haunted her dreams, the man who commanded the city with ruthless precision, stood there in a long black coat, rain dripping from the shoulders, eyes dark and unreadable. He looked nothing like the man she remembered. Older, sharper, the weight of power etched into every line of his face. Yet his gaze softened when it fell on the child in her arms. "This is him?" he asked, voice low, almost unrecognizable to her ears. There was no anger, no accusation, only the cold, measured curiosity of a man who was used to having control over everything. Yet when the baby reached out and touched Dominic's hand, his composure cracked for a brief, human second. He had never imagined a life where this tiny, helpless boy existed, his son, and yet not. She watched him study the child, a storm behind his eyes, and finally spoke. "He's yours." The words were simple, but they carried a lifetime of fear, regret, and hidden love. Dominic's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, not raising his voice, but the question trembled between them. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I didn't want him to grow up in your world. I wanted him safe. I thought I was protecting him. From you, from yourself." The silence that followed was heavy. Dominic's eyes softened slightly, not in warmth, but in something more complicated. Regret, responsibility, and an unexpected ache that made his chest tighten. He had lost 3 years of his son's life, and there was no way to reclaim them. Dominic finally knelt beside the crib, eyes never leaving the child. "He doesn't even know me," he said softly, almost to himself. And then, in a tone so low it could have been a whisper meant only for the rain outside, he added, "I should have known. I should have been there." Her own tears fell freely now, and for a moment, the past 3 years, the separation, the silence, the hidden letters and longing glances crashed down on them both. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't even expect understanding. But in that room, amidst the storm outside and the quiet cries of a hungry child, something fragile began to form, a possibility that the past could meet the present, and maybe, just maybe, the future could be rewritten. She looked up at him, voice barely audible. "Can you help him?" Dominic nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "I'll do more than help him. I'll protect him. I promise." And in that promise, there was a tremor, a human crack in the armor of the man who ruled an empire with fear. She could see the man she once loved behind the boss, the part of him that had wanted family, wanted connection, wanted redemption. And though the road ahead would be treacherous, The city would whisper about the night the Mafia boss's heart softened, if only for a moment, because of the child he never knew he had. As he took the bottle from her hands and fed his son with surprising tenderness, she realized that the world outside the violence, the betrayals, the power struggles suddenly didn't matter. What mattered was the tiny life in his arms, and the possibility that love, even in a world as dark as theirs, could find a way back. The rain continued to fall, relentless and steady, but inside that small apartment was a different kind of storm, a storm of awakening, of regret, of fragile beginnings. Neither of them could speak yet, but the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with a tentative, unspoken promise that the past was only the beginning, and that their story, dangerous, complicated, and raw, was about to unfold. Outside, the city slept, unaware that its most feared Mafia boss had just been shaken to his core, not by enemies, not by betrayal, but by a simple message at 4:47 a.m. Your son has no milk. And somewhere deep inside, Dominic realized that sometimes the smallest truths, the softest cries of an innocent child, could shake even the strongest of men. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Dominic: stay home tonight. I'm coming. Don't let him cry alone. She stared at it, breathless. This was no ordinary night, and neither of them would ever be the same. The knock on the door came again, sharper this time, echoing through the small apartment as if it carried the weight of the entire city. She had expected it, yet nothing could have prepared her for the chill that ran down her spine as she opened it. Dominic stood there again, his coat dripping, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes that seemed to hold both storms and regrets. He didn't speak at first. He just stepped inside, surveying the apartment with a meticulous gaze that reminded her why the city feared him. But his eyes softened the instant they fell on the baby, asleep now, the bottle clutched loosely in his tiny fist. He began, and then stopped, as if words could betray him. He looked at her, really looked, and she saw it there: guilt, longing, a fragile thread of vulnerability she had never expected to witness in the man who commanded entire neighborhoods with a glance. You've kept him safe, he finally said, voice low, almost reverent. I owe you an apology. She shook her head, brushing damp hair from her face. No, don't. We were young, and you had a life I couldn't be part of. I didn't want to drag him into that, your world. Your enemies, your business, it's not a life for a child. He ran a hand over his face, long fingers catching in the wet strands of his hair. Do you think I don't regret it every day? His voice cracked just slightly. I never stopped thinking about you, about him. And now, he trailed off, looking at his son with something that wasn't fear, but something heavier, like sorrow for lost time. The baby stirred, making a tiny whimper, and Dominic instinctively bent, placing a hand gently on the small shoulder. I'm here now, he whispered, almost to himself, almost as if speaking aloud could make the past vanish. The mother's heart ached at the tenderness, a stark contrast to the ruthless figure everyone in the city whispered about in fear. She sat down cautiously on the edge of the sofa, still clutching a small blanket. I wasn't sure you would come, she admitted, her voice trembling. I thought maybe you'd ignore me. Or worse. Dominic's gaze snapped to hers, dark and unwavering. Do you think I would let my son go hungry? Do you think I could ever ignore him or you? There was a pause, and she realized she had never seen him like this, human, fragile in the right places, haunted by choices. I was a fool, he said finally, almost choking on the words. A complete fool for leaving you, for leaving him. Tears formed unbidden in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to cry, to let every bit of anger and longing spill out. But instead, she simply nodded. He's 3 now, she whispered. 3 years without you. Dominic crouched beside her, hands resting lightly on his knees. He looked at his son again, studying the small round face, the tiny fists curling and uncurling. 3 years, he repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. And I missed all of it. First steps, first words, first smile. His voice broke. I can't fix that. She shook her head softly. No one can fix the past. But maybe we can try now. For the first time, Dominic's expression softened entirely, the ice around his heart beginning to crack. He reached out, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence, and touched the baby's tiny hand. The boy's eyes blinked open, and a faint, innocent smile curved his lips as if he recognized something in this man, his father, though he didn't yet know it. "Hey, little one," Dominic murmured, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "I'm Dominic. I know this is sudden, but I'm here now, and I promise I'll never leave again." The mother watched, a strange mix of relief and anxiety twisting in her chest. She wanted to trust him, to believe in the possibility of redemption, but the man standing there was the same man who ruled empires through fear. Could he truly be capable of tenderness, of love? The baby's tiny hand gripped Dominic's finger, and the sight made her heart ache, because this small gesture, so innocent, demanded faith. Hours passed in silence, the storm outside waning, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows. They didn't speak much, yet the silence was different now, not tense, but fragile, filled with the weight of unspoken apologies and tentative hope. Finally, Dominic stood, his eyes meeting hers. "I need to know everything," he said. "I need to know how you've managed, what you've been through, so I can understand him, and you." She nodded, hesitant, wary, but also relieved that he wanted to know. "It hasn't been easy," she said softly. "I've struggled. I've cried more than I can count. And I've loved him fiercely, but alone." Dominic swallowed hard. "And I have nothing to offer but my presence now. My protection, my mistakes, but I swear I will try to be the father he deserves." Her eyes filled again. She had waited so long for someone to say those words, and even though he had been absent, even though the past had hurt her, hearing them now made the tension in her chest loosen just slightly. "He deserves that," she whispered, "and so do you if you can find it in yourself." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I will," he promised. "For him, for you." And for the first time in years, the three of them, the mother, the child, and the man who had once broken them, sat together in fragile silence, a storm of emotions swirling around them. Outside, the city slept, unaware that its most feared Mafia boss was learning what it meant to be human, to love, and to face the consequences of lost time. The mother's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "He knows. He's coming for the child." She felt her stomach drop. Dominic's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and controlled in an instant. "We have no time," he said quietly, but every muscle in his body was ready, coiled like a predator. "We need to move." And in that instant, the fragile moment of peace shattered. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the streets below were slick with reflections of neon and headlights, shadows dancing in the puddles. She held her son close, the warmth of his tiny body against hers, a fragile shield against the fear that now coiled in her chest. Dominic's coat brushed against her shoulder as he moved around the small apartment. With quiet, precise movements, every step controlled, every gesture deliberate. She watched him, the man she had loved and left behind, now completely altered by the weight of responsibility, and something inside her trembled. He knelt beside the baby's crib, eyes scanning, calculating every muscle in his body taut. The message she had received on her phone earlier lingered in her mind like a dark omen. "He knows. He's coming for the child." The words were simple, yet the threat carried a weight she couldn't dismiss. She realized then that their fragile peace was about to be shattered. Dominic's voice cut through the tension, low and firm. "We leave now. I don't know who knows, or how far they've tracked him, but we can't wait." His eyes met hers, and she saw no fear, only the cold, unyielding certainty of a man who'd ruled entire empires with his decisions. And yet, beneath that steel, there was something else, an acknowledgement of guilt, of missed years, of the silent vow to protect this child, no matter the cost. Her hands trembled as she gathered a small bag of essentials. Where will we go?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Dominic didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window, peering into the darkened street below, the city sprawling endlessly indifferent. "Somewhere safe," he finally said. "Somewhere they won't find him." His jaw clenched. "I've made enemies who would kill for leverage, for revenge. And now he's a target." She swallowed hard, anxiety gnawing at her. She had imagined threats before, fleeting wars in the shadows of her small life, but seeing the intensity in his eyes made it clear this wasn't a threat they could ignore. This was real. and she was terrified. Dominic turned to her, softer now, almost human in his expression. "I'm sorry you had to face this alone," he murmured. "You've been carrying this burden without me. And he paused, as if the words themselves were knives in his chest. "I failed you both, but I will fix it, I promise." She looked at him, trying to read the man she had once loved in the contours of his face, the man who was now responsible for more than just himself. "You can't fix the past," she whispered. "But maybe we can survive the present together." He nodded, accepting her words, and for the briefest moment, the storm of regret and fear softened into something fragile and fleeting. But the moment was gone as quickly as it had come. A shadow moved outside the building, subtle, deliberate, and unmistakable to the trained eye. Dominic's hand was on the baby instantly, cradling him with a protective strength that made her heart race. "They're here," he said, his voice a low growl. She felt her chest tighten as he moved toward the door, checking the locks, the windows, every potential point of entry. "Listen carefully," he continued. "Stay close to him. Follow my instructions exactly. Don't make a sound." She nodded, gripping her son, as if her own heartbeat could shield him. Dominic's movements were quiet but purposeful. He retrieved a small, sleek weapon from his coat. Something she had never imagined seeing up close cold. Lethal, efficient. Yet the fear in her chest wasn't only for herself. It was for the child who had no idea how dangerous their world truly was. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each sound outside the scrape of a boot on concrete. The soft rustle of a bag in the darkened hall made her flinch. Dominic's presence was steady though, a wall up, calm in the storm. He whispered instructions softly, precise and unyielding, moving like a shadow between the apartment and the fire escape. "Go," he said finally, pressing a hand to her back. "Take him and go out the back. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'll cover you." Her stomach lurched, fear clawing at her throat, but she obeyed. The baby stirred but remained quiet as she followed Dominic's gaze, descending the fire escape with shaking hands. She dared a glance over her shoulder and caught sight of him, Dominic standing by the door, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable yet impossibly strong. Her chest tightened at the sight. He was willing to stand between their son and death itself. The night outside was damp, the rain having turned streets into mirrors of neon. She ran, clutching her son, adrenaline mingling with terror and disbelief. Every instinct screamed that this was the end, that their fragile reunion could be ripped apart in a heartbeat. But Dominic's presence, the knowledge that he was behind them, somewhere, guarding, protecting, gave her a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. And then a sound, footsteps. Not random, measured. They were coming for the child, and the city's shadows seemed to pulse with menace. She froze, heart hammering, gripping her son tightly. But just as panic threatened to consume her, she heard it. Dominic's voice, cutting through the night, calm yet commanding, echoing across the walls of the city like a promise and a threat combined. "Back off. Now." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a man who had built empires, made lives crumble, and commanded fear effortlessly. Somewhere in the dark, a shiver ran through those who had dared to approach. She turned, tears streaking her face, and saw Dominic step from the shadows, weapon low but eyes sharp, moving with lethal precision. For the first time, she understood fully. The man she had once loved and feared was willing to face everything, the entire world, for this child. And in that moment, as rain-slicked streets glimmered around them, she realized that their story, their fragile, terrifying, beautiful story, was just beginning. The night felt alive with danger, every shadow a potential threat, every distant footstep a drumbeat of fear. She pressed her son to her chest. As they ducked behind a crumbling wall, the smell of wet asphalt and rain heavy in her lungs, Dominic was just ahead, moving with fluid precision, the kind that made the world bend to his control even in the chaos. She had never felt such a mix of terror and awe here. Was the man who had once ruled her heart, now ruling the streets for the sake of a child he had never known. The sound of the pursuers grew louder, boots splashing through puddles, the faint metallic click of weapons being readied. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but Dominic's calm presence was magnetic, forcing her to hold still. to trust that he knew what he was doing. Every instinct in her body screamed otherwise, yet she obeyed, clinging to the fragile thread of hope he offered. Dominic glanced back over his shoulder, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Stay low. Keep moving. Don't make a sound," he whispered, and she nodded, her throat tight. His voice so commanding, so grounded, was the only thing keeping her from panicking completely. They moved through the alleys, shadows clinging to them like armor. She caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Jaw set, eyes scanning, muscles taut with controlled energy. The man she had once loved, the one who had left her and now appeared. To be saving her son was a contradiction she couldn't reconcile. Cold, ruthless, tender, human, dangerous, protective. She didn't know how to feel, and that uncertainty twisted inside her like a knife. Then the sound hit them, voices low and rough, echoing in the alley ahead. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He crouched behind a dumpster, signaling for her to do the same. She obeyed immediately, holding her son tighter, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest. Dominic's presence was a shield, yet the fear coiled in her stomach reminded her that even he wasn't invincible. "They're armed," Dominic murmured under his breath, scanning the alley like a predator. "But we have the advantage. They don't know this terrain." He paused, then crouched closer to her. "I'll distract them. You move forward. Keep him safe. Understand?" She swallowed hard, nodding. "Be careful." He gave her a look that was almost human. Vulnerable. "I always am," he muttered, then pushed off, disappearing into the shadows. With the quiet, lethal grace of a man who had never failed in the streets, she held her breath, the pounding of her heart drowning out every other sound. City's neon reflecting in her tears as she clutched her son like a lifeline. Minutes stretched like hours. She moved carefully, following Dominic's earlier instructions. Each step deliberate, each movement measured. The baby stirred, and she whispered softly, soothing him, trying to mask the terror in her own voice. Every shadow seemed to twitch, every distant footstep made her jump, but she kept moving, following the path he had laid out for her. Suddenly, a shout broke the silence. A figure emerged from the darkness, blocking her path, weapon raised. Her heart leapt, and she froze, unsure if she should run or fight. Then a shot rang out, not close enough to harm, but loud, precise, and controlled. The figure dropped instantly, as if struck by an unseen hand. Dominic emerged from the shadows, eyes blazing, every movement a testament to the lethal precision that had built his empire. He looked at her briefly, a flicker of emotion crossing his face, relief, maybe, or pride that she was safe. "Keep moving," he commanded, voice low but sharp. "Don't stop until we're out." She ran, tears blurring her vision, the baby cradled tightly. Behind her, she heard Dominic's footsteps, measured, echoing. In the alley, each one a shield, a promise, a warning. Every instinct told her to look back, but she didn't dare. She trusted him, even as her body screamed in terror, even as the city itself seemed to close in on them. They emerged onto a quieter street, the rain having washed away the immediate danger. She leaned against a wall, gasping for breath, feeling the baby stir again. Dominic was there instantly, crouching beside her, scanning the surroundings with his usual meticulous focus. "They won't give up," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "They'll come back. And next time it might not be so easy." She looked at him, her chest tight. "But you'll protect him. You'll protect us, right?" His gaze softened for a fraction of a second, the steel giving way to something raw, human, full of unspoken regret and devotion. "I will," he said, voice firm. "No matter what it takes. I won't fail again." For a moment, the world outside, the violence, the threats, the city's unforgiving streets faded. It was just the three of them, the mother, her son, and the man who had once left them both. She realized, with a jolt of emotion, that she had never seen him like this. Completely human, completely devoted, completely broken by love and regret. And yet, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, a spark of hope flickered. Perhaps they could survive this together. Perhaps the past didn't have to define them. Perhaps the child could grow up knowing both love and protection, not just fear. Dominic finally rose, keeping his eyes sharp, but his gaze softened on them, We need to move again, he said. I have a place where we'll be safe. For now. She nodded, rising slowly, the baby cradled against her chest. For the first time, she felt a fragile sense of trust, a tentative hope that even in a city ruled by power, fear, and revenge, there was a chance for something real. And as they disappeared into the wet, neon-lit streets, she realized that their story, the story of lost years, of secrets, of danger, and of love, was far from over. Somewhere, in the shadows, their enemies waited. But so did Dominic, and for the first time in years, she believed that maybe, just maybe, love could survive in the heart of a storm. The safe house was small, tucked away in a quiet part of the city no one cared to notice. Rain-slicked streets reflected the dim glow of distant streetlights, and inside, the air smelled of old wood and faint smoke. Dominic closed the door behind them, locking it twice, then leaned against it, letting out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time since the night began, he allowed himself a fraction of stillness. The mother sat on the couch, her son in her arms, eyes wide but calm now. He had finally fallen asleep, lulled by the warmth of her embrace and the rhythmic beating of her heart. She watched Dominic carefully, unsure what to say, unsure if the man before her was the same one she had loved years ago, or the man she feared would destroy everything if he let his empire dictate his emotions. Dominic moved silently to the window, peering through the blinds at the rain-soaked streets outside. They'll look for him, he said, voice low, more to himself than anyone else. They'll come back, and it won't be long this time. We need to be ready. She nodded, clutching her son tighter. We'll be careful. I trust you. The words hung in the air, fragile but significant, like the first tentative step across a rickety bridge. Dominic didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his eyes met hers, hard and unflinching yet softened by something she hadn't expected, remorse. I failed you, he said quietly, almost painfully. Not just the boy I walked away. I left you alone. I have no excuse. None. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them. You were young, scared, and busy ruling a world I didn't want for my child. I've survived without you. I've learned to be strong. Her voice wavered, betraying the vulnerability she didn't want him to see. But it's been lonely, terrifying, and I needed him more than I needed you back then. Dominic's hand hovered near his face, fingers brushing the stubble along his jawline. And now? He asked, almost hesitantly. Now, I need him to be safe, she said, softer. And I want him to know you. If you can, if you truly want to be here. He nodded slowly, a weight settling over him, both heavy and liberating. I want to be here, he said, voice firm. I don't care what it takes. I'll protect him. I'll make up for the years I lost. And I'll be here for you, if you'll let me. The words made her heart ache in ways she hadn't anticipated. Years of fear, resentment, and longing swirled together in a knot she didn't know how to untangle. Yet, beneath it all, a small ember of hope sparked. Maybe the man who had abandoned her could return, not just as a father, but as someone she could trust again. Dominic moved closer, crouching near her, careful not to startle the sleeping child. His eyes softened as he studied the boy, tracing the tiny features that mirrored his own. He looks like me, he murmured, almost in disbelief. I can see it, and it breaks me, knowing I wasn't there. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. He's alive, because I fought for him, she said, voice firm. And now, maybe he can have both of us. He can have you. For a moment, silence settled between them, filled only by the faint drip of rain outside and the baby's even breathing. Dominic's shoulders tensed and relaxed in rhythm with his heart, a man trying to reconcile the past with the present. You're amazing, he said finally, almost under his breath. Stronger than I could ever imagine. I don't know if I deserve this. You don't have to deserve it, she whispered. You just have to want it. Dominic's eyes lingered on her, a storm of emotions crossing his face, regret, longing, love, and fear. And in that moment, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. The man who had once been untouchable, cold, and controlling now stood before her as someone capable of love, capable of change, capable of heartbreak. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silent. Inside, the three of them, the mother, the child, and the man who had once left them, sat together, fragile but united. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. And the threats outside were far from gone. But for the first time, the mother felt a tentative sense of trust, and Dominic allowed himself a fleeting, terrifying hope that redemption might be possible. Then the silence was broken by a subtle sound, a click at the door. Not forceful, not loud, but deliberate. Dominic froze instantly, his body moving like a coiled spring, every instinct alive. "They've found us," he muttered under his breath, moving toward the door. His hand rested on the handle, ready to act, eyes dark with controlled fury. She gripped her son tightly, heart hammering. What do we do?" Dominic's gaze softened for a fleeting moment as he looked at her. "We survive," he said simply, "and we fight. Together." The baby stirred again, tiny hands reaching out, and she realized in that instant, whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them as a family. But even as she felt that fragile hope, she couldn't shake the terror that had taken root. Their enemies were relentless. The city was merciless. And the man who had once left them now had everything to lose: his son, the woman he loved, and the fragile chance at redemption he had only just begun to grasp. Dominic glanced at her one last time before gripping the door handle, ready to confront whatever awaited them. "No matter what happens," he said quietly, "I won't fail again." And in that moment she believed him. Dominic's hand lingered on the door handle, his knuckles white as he listened to the faint sounds outside, the soft shuffle of boots on wet concrete, the whisper of movement in the shadows. Every instinct in his body screamed that danger had arrived, yet he remained calm, controlled, the storm of years of experience shaping every step, every breath. He glanced at her, eyes dark but steady. "Stay behind me. Keep him close." She nodded, clutching their son tightly, the boy's small face pressed into her chest. She felt the heat of his body, the tiny rise and fall of his chest, and her own fear sharpened into a protective edge. Nothing, no threat, could take him from her. Not tonight, not ever. Dominic twisted the handle slowly, pushing the door just enough to peer out. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, faces obscured by hoods, hands twitching toward weapons. Dominic's eyes narrowed, reading every movement in a single glance, his mind calculating odds, trajectories, escape routes. "You picked the wrong night," he muttered under his breath, and then louder, "Back off. Now." His voice was steel, deliberate, carrying authority that made the air itself seem to tighten. The figures hesitated. Then one stepped forward, smirking. "Romano," the man sneered, "you're alone this time. Let the kid go, and maybe you walk out of here." Dominic's jaw tightened, his gaze icy. "I am never alone," he said, stepping fully into the hallway, his presence filling the space. "And he's not yours to touch." There was a tense pause, the kind that makes seconds feel like hours, until the first man lunged. Dominic moved like liquid, precise and unrelenting. A single, controlled strike incapacitated him before he even had time to react. The second man barely managed to raise his weapon before Dominic had it twisted from his grip, rendering him useless. She gasped, clutching her son tighter, heart racing. The baby stirred slightly, sensing the tension but remaining asleep in her arms. She had never seen Dominic like this, calculated, lethal. Yet every move was almost surgical, almost merciful. Even in violence, there was control. The last man hesitated, eyes flicking between Dominic and her, realizing the futility of resistance. You can't," he started, but Dominic's hand shot out, gripping his collar and lifting him effortlessly. "I can," Dominic said simply, voice cold, almost detached. "And I will." The man went limp, the fight drained from him in seconds, and Dominic set him down with a precise shove, leaving him crumpled against the wall. Dominic exhaled slowly, tension leaving him in a controlled wave. He turned to her, gaze softer now but still fierce. "Are you all right?" She nodded, trembling. I'm fine. He's fine." She looked down at the baby, who had slept through the confrontation, and her heart clenched in relief. You saved us." Dominic's hand brushed a wet strand of hair from her face, his touch unexpectedly gentle after the violence. "I always will," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. "No one harms him. No one harms you. Not while I'm here." The mother felt a lump in her throat, emotions twisting and knotting together, fear, gratitude, love, and lingering resentment all wrapped tightly around each other. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagined him protecting their son, imagined him back in their lives, but now that it had come, the reality was almost too much to bear. Dominic surveyed the hallway one last time, ensuring no one remained. Then he turned fully to her, the darkness in his eyes softening into something almost human, almost vulnerable. "We can't stay," he said. "They'll send more. We need to move before dawn. I have a place safe. For now." She nodded, following him into the rain-soaked streets again, baby cradled against her chest. Dominic moved ahead, scanning every corner, every shadow, protective in a way that left her both terrified and awed. She realized she had never truly seen the depth of his commitment, not to his power, not to the city, but to them. As they reached a quieter street, Dominic paused, glancing at her. "You did well," he said, voice low. "You stayed calm. You kept him safe. That's not easy. You're stronger than you know." She shook her head, a small, bitter laugh escaping. "I did what I had to do. I've been doing it alone for 3 years. You don't get to say how strong I am." Dominic's gaze softened further, vulnerability slipping through the cracks in his otherwise impenetrable facade. "Maybe I don't," he admitted, "but I see it now. And I admire it. I admire you." The words hung in the cold, damp night, heavier than any rain-soaked street or lingering threat. For the first time, she felt the possibility of something beyond survival, maybe connection, maybe trust, maybe even love. But the city was still awake, still dangerous, and Dominic's voice pulled her back to reality. "Move, we can talk later. For now, we survive." She nodded again, following him as the shadows swallowed them, the baby safe in her arms, the promise of protection and redemption moving ahead of them into the uncertain night. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that the man who had once left them was now the only thing standing between them and the darkness. The safe house they reached was different from the first one, a larger, more secure place, tucked away in a quiet part of the city no one visited. Dominic had chosen it carefully, and she could see why. Reinforced doors, discreet windows, and a sense of quiet isolation that made her chest unclench for the first time that night. Rain had stopped entirely, leaving only the faint smell of wet asphalt and distant exhaust in the air. Dominic moved quickly, setting the baby down on a soft blanket on a makeshift crib. The boy stirred, blinking up at Dominic with sleepy eyes, and she felt her heart tighten at the small, fragile trust the child was already beginning to place in him. She watched Dominic's fingers brush the baby's hair back gently, a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the ruthless aura he had projected just hours ago. "Safe for now," Dominic muttered, pacing the room with a restless energy. His gaze flicked constantly toward the windows, toward the doors. "But it's not enough. They'll keep coming." She stayed near the crib, hands clasped together, fighting the tremor in her body. "I know," she said quietly, "but at least he's here. At least he knows someone is protecting him." Dominic paused, looking at her fully for the first time since they arrived. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, dark, intense, and vulnerable, betrayed everything he refused to say aloud. "You're right," he said softly. "And I should have been here sooner. I should have never left you alone." Her breath caught. The words were almost too much. She had imagined hearing apologies for years, dreamed of them in moments of quiet longing, but now that they were here, in the room, voiced by the man she had loved and feared, she didn't know how to respond. "It's complicated," she whispered. 3 years I've lived with everything alone, and now you show up and expect things to be normal." Dominic shook his head slowly, a small, bitter laugh escaping him. "Normal?" he echoed. "No, nothing about this is normal, and I don't expect anything. I want to try to be here, to be the father he deserves, and maybe to be something more for you, if you'll let me." Her eyes widened, and she felt the familiar knot of emotion tighten in her chest. He was daring to say it, daring to reach across the wounds of the past with words she had longed to hear, and yet fear lingered, because the man standing before her wasn't the boy she had loved. He was a man who ruled a city through fear and power, a man who had left her, who could destroy as easily as he could protect. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to believe in what he promised? Dominic crouched beside the crib, voice softening as he spoke to the baby. "Hey, little one," he murmured. "I'm Dominic. I know we've got a lot to catch up on, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." The baby blinked at him, cooing faintly, tiny fingers curling around Dominic's hand. The sight struck her harder than any words ever could. The connection between father and son, fragile but undeniable, forming in mere moments. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Dominic glanced at her, noticing the shimmer in her eyes. "I didn't come back to hurt you," he said softly. "I came back because I can't fix the past, but I can fight for the future. For him. For you." She swallowed hard, voice barely audible. "I want to believe you. You will," he said firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. "In time. I just need time, and I promise I'll earn it. Every day." A silence fell over the room, but it was not empty. It was filled with the quiet rhythm of the baby's breathing, the faint hum of distant traffic, and the tentative heartbeat of a connection that had long been severed. She realized that trust wouldn't come instantly, and forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but the possibility existed, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life where they weren't defined solely by absence and fear. Dominic rose, moving to check the locks on the doors and the windows once more. He glanced back at her. "Rest. Stay with him. I'll keep watch tonight." She hesitated, then nodded. Sitting beside the crib, she watched him silently, every movement a reminder of how far he had come. From absence to protector, from man of power to father in the making. The air between them was thick with unspoken apologies and lingering desire, a tension neither could ignore. Hours passed in quiet vigilance. She allowed herself to relax slightly, watching her son sleep safely, hearing Dominic's careful footsteps as he circled the apartment. He returned occasionally, kneeling beside the crib, checking on the boy, offering a gentle smile. And with each visit, each small act of care, the walls around her heart began to soften. Eventually, she leaned back, exhaustion taking hold, and whispered to the baby, "We might be safe. For now." Dominic crouched beside her, hand brushing hers lightly. "For now," he echoed, voice low and steady. "But I'll make sure it's more than that. I'll protect him. I'll protect you. And I'll make things right, however long it takes." For the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, cautious hope. And in that moment, with the baby safe between them and the storm of the past slowly fading, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the future could be theirs if they survived the night. But even as hope flickered, the city outside waited, dangerous, unrelenting, reminding them both that peace was fragile, fleeting, and never guaranteed. The night had settled into a quiet lull, the city outside humming faintly, oblivious to the fragile life within the safe house. Dominic sat near the window, his back to her, eyes scanning the streets below with relentless focus. Every shadow, every flicker of movement, made his muscles tense, even though hours had passed without incident. It was a vigilance born of years ruling an empire, but now it carried a different weight, the weight of a son and a woman he could not lose again. She watched him from across the room, her son nestled safely in her arms. His movements were deliberate, controlled, almost fragile in their precision. She realized how much had changed, how different he was from the man who had left her, cold and distant, all those years ago. Now every gesture carried care. Every glance carried calculation, and every moment was imbued with the responsibility he had once shirked. Her heart ached with a mix of longing and fear. "You've changed," she whispered softly, almost to herself. Dominic turned at the sound of her voice, his dark eyes catching hers. "I had to," he said quietly. "I can't be the man I was. Not anymore. Not if I want to keep him safe. And not if I want to make things right with you." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words. "You left me," she said, voice trembling. "You left him. You left me to carry everything alone." "I know," he admitted, stepping closer. His voice was softer now, stripped of the power and menace that usually defined him. "And I regret it every day. There isn't a moment that goes by where I don't think about what I lost. about what I left behind. She felt tears prick her eyes. I survived, she whispered. I protected him, even when I wanted to scream, even when I felt hopeless. I became everything for him because no one else would. Dominic's expression softened, vulnerability breaking through the tough exterior. He usually carried like armor. And you did it beautifully, he murmured. You made him whole even when I wasn't there. And now I have a chance to be part of that. The baby stirred, small fingers reaching out toward Dominic. His expression softened further as he knelt beside them, letting the boy curl his tiny fingers around his hand. She watched the scene, feeling the rush of emotions: relief, awe, fear, and a hesitant hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be trusted with love as well as power. You've got to promise me something, she said finally, voice trembling but firm. Promise me you won't leave him. Promise me you'll stay. Dominic's jaw tightened, eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. I promise, he said simply, almost too simply, but the conviction in his tone left no room for doubt. I will never leave him, and I will never leave you. Not again. For a moment, silence enveloped them, broken only by the soft breathing of the child and the distant hum of the city. The weight of years, of mistakes, of regrets hung between them, heavy and almost unbearable. Yet the promise lingered, fragile but real. She hesitated, then reached out, touching his hand lightly, feeling the warmth of skin and the strength behind it. I want to believe you, she whispered. And you will, he said, leaning closer, his voice barely audible. In time, I'll earn it. The closeness, the intensity, the unspoken desire in his eyes made her heart race. She wanted to step back, to protect herself from vulnerability, but the baby stirred again, tiny fingers brushing her cheek, grounding her in the present. She realized that the man in front of her wasn't just a threat or a ghost from the past. He was now a protector, a father, a man trying desperately to reclaim what he had lost. Dominic crouched closer, watching the child with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He doesn't know it yet, he murmured, but he's got both of us now. And I'll make sure he never feels alone again. She felt tears spill freely, a mixture of relief and longing. I hope you mean that, she said softly. I do. He replied, voice steady, eyes dark and unwavering. I'll spend every day proving it. No matter what comes, no matter who tries to take him, he's ours. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a fragile sense of trust. She leaned back against the wall, letting her son rest against her chest, watching Dominic carefully, absorbing the way his presence filled the room with a protective warmth that hadn't existed before. And then, without warning, a faint creak came from the floor above, a sound so subtle it could have been imagined. Dominic's head snapped toward it, his body instantly tensing like a spring coiled for action. The warmth and tenderness evaporated in an instant, replaced by the razor-sharp vigilance that had saved them moments ago. They're close, he muttered, moving toward the stairs, eyes scanning every shadow. We need to be ready. Now. She gripped her son, heart hammering, realizing that even in the fleeting moments of connection, danger was never far behind. And as Dominic prepared for what was coming, she felt a mix of fear and admiration. This man, ruthless, powerful, was now a father and protector, willing to face anything for the two people he loved most. The city outside continued its indifferent hum, but inside the safe house, a storm was brewing, a storm of enemies, emotions, and truths long buried. And in the center of it all stood the fragile, unspoken possibility that love, even in a world as dark as theirs, could survive. The quiet shattered like glass the moment the front door trembled under a heavy kick. Dominic was instantly on his feet, body taut, eyes scanning every shadow. She froze, clutching her son to her chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat hammering in sync with hers. The soft, protective warmth that had filled the room only moments ago evaporated, replaced by the raw, cold edge of "Dungyer, they're here," Dominic muttered, voice low, controlled, but every muscle in his body coiled like a predator ready to strike. Stay behind me. Keep him safe. Her grip tightened on their son, whispering comfort into his ear as if sheer will could shield him. She saw Dominic's hand tighten around the weapon at his side, the familiar weight of authority settling over him. He had always commanded fear. But now that fear was for the wrong reasons. He wasn't protecting an empire or his own pride. He was protecting his son, and the woman he had once abandoned. The door burst open with a violent crash. 3 men stormed inside, faces masked, weapons raised. Dominic moved first, swift, fluid, controlled. In an instant he was between them and the mother, a wall of lethal precision. A single, precise movement disarmed one attacker, sending him sprawling across the floor. Another swung a metal rod, but Dominic's reflexes were uncanny. He deflected. It encountered with a strike that left the man incapacitated. The mother crouched beside the crib, shielding the baby, heart pounding. She had never witnessed violence so controlled, so terrifyingly beautiful in its precision. Dominic was a storm contained, moving with lethal grace, yet every action was guided by the single purpose of keeping them safe. The third man hesitated, calculating Dominic's skill, his chance of success, but Dominic's gaze met his, dark and unflinching, and something primal in the man faltered. Dominic advanced, slowly, deliberately, weapon ready, eyes locked onto the threat with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "Leave," Dominic said, voice low but unwavering. "Now. Walk away, or you'll regret it." The man faltered, weapon shaking slightly. Dominic took another step forward, the tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls. Then, without warning, the intruder lunged. Dominic's response was instantaneous, precise, brutal, yet controlled. A swift maneuver disarmed him, and the man collapsed, gasping, utterly defeated. The room fell silent, the echoes of chaos replaced by the rapid breaths of the mother and the soft whimper of their son. Dominic exhaled slowly, checking both her and the baby. "Are you both all right?" he asked, voice roughened by tension but soft with concern. She nodded, unable to speak, tears welling in her eyes as relief washed over her. The baby stirred, tiny fingers brushing Dominic's hand, and her chest tightened at the sight. He was theirs, fragile but alive, and Dominic had protected him like no one else could. Dominic turned toward her, eyes dark with intensity and emotion. "I won't let anyone touch him. Not ever. Do you understand?" She nodded, voice trembling. "I understand." He stepped closer, still vigilant, scanning the shadows outside the broken door. "This city, it doesn't forgive easily, and neither do my enemies. But I'll face them all. For him. For you." She met his gaze, seeing the depth of his commitment reflected there. The man who had left them years ago, who had ruled with fear and power, was now transformed by love, by regret, and by a fierce determination to protect the family he had created and almost destroyed. Hours passed in tense vigilance. Dominic reinforced the locks, checked every possible entry point, and moved between the crib and the windows like a shadow, ensuring that no threat could reach them. She watched him silently, heart aching, feeling the full weight of their shared history, the love, the betrayal, the longing, and now the fragile hope of redemption. Finally, he sat beside her, exhaustion flickering across his features. He leaned back against the wall, letting the tension seep out of his body in a slow, controlled release. "We survived," he murmured, voice hoarse but steady. "Tonight, we survived. And we'll survive tomorrow too." She reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from his face. "You saved us," she said softly. "All of us. And I can't imagine facing the world without you now." Dominic's eyes softened, dark intensity giving way to something raw and vulnerable. "I'll never leave again," he said, voice quiet but unwavering. "Not him, not you. I'll make up for everything I lost, starting now." The baby stirred in her arms, tiny eyes blinking open to meet Dominic's gaze. For the first time, she saw him not as a powerful, feared Mafia boss, but as a father, a protector, a man transformed by love and guilt into something human. And in that moment she realized something profound. They had survived. The storm of enemies, the storm of the city, the storm of the past. But the real storm, the one inside them, full of regrets, unspoken longing, and fragile trust, was only beginning. Dominic reached out, fingers brushing hers over the baby's tiny hand. "We're going to get through this," he said softly, voice rough with emotion. "Together." She nodded, tears spilling freely now, heart aching and full all at once. Together, she whispered, and as the city slept beyond the reinforced walls, the three of them, father, mother, and son, sat together, fragile but united, knowing that the battles outside would continue, but their bond, for the first time in years, was unbreakable. The first light of dawn seeped through the blinds, soft and tentative, like a promise. The city outside had woken, unaware that a small family had survived the night that could have destroyed them. Dominic sat near the window, his eyes scanning the streets one last time, but the tension in his shoulders had eased slightly. The danger hadn't disappeared entirely, he knew that, but for now, they were safe. She sat on the couch, the baby cradled in her arms, his tiny hands brushing against hers and Dominic's in a quiet, innocent rhythm. She looked at him, the man who had once been her world, her torment, her regret. For the first time, she saw something new, not the distant, powerful Mafia boss who had left her years ago, but a man who had chosen love over fear, family over power. Dominic finally turned from the window, his dark eyes soft but intense as they met hers. "We've survived the storm," he said quietly, voice rough but steady. "The worst is behind us, and I'll make sure it stays that way." Her chest tightened. I never thought I'd hear you say that," she admitted, voice trembling. "Not after all these years." He stepped closer, his presence filling the room without words, kind of presence that made her heart ache with longing and relief. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," he said softly. "I can't change the past. But I can be here now. I can be everything I failed to be before." She swallowed hard, feeling tears prick her eyes. You've already proven that," she said. "By being here, by protecting him, by staying, even when the city wanted to take him." Dominic reached out slowly, fingertips brushing her cheek, careful, reverent, as if touching her too forcefully could undo the fragile trust between them. "I will spend the rest of my life proving it," he said, voice low, full of sincerity. "I'll never leave him alone again. I'll never leave you alone again. That's my promise." She let herself believe it, let herself lean into the warmth of his presence, letting the weight of years of fear, anger, and longing begin to lift. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, it was about finding each other again, about rebuilding what had been lost, about choosing to fight for love and family in a world that demanded power over tenderness. The baby stirred, cooing softly, and both of them looked down at him, the small miracle that had brought them back together. Dominic knelt beside the couch, gently brushing his hand along their son's tiny back, marveling at the life that had come from a world he had once abandoned. "He's perfect," Dominic murmured, voice breaking slightly. "You made him perfect." She laughed softly, a mixture of relief and joy. "You've got a lot to make up for," she said, teasing gently, though her heart ached with the truth of it. 3 years, and now you're suddenly a father." Dominic's eyes softened, a shadow of guilt still lingering but tempered by love and resolve. "I'll spend every day making it right," he said simply. "Every day, no excuses, no regrets, just us." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future together, a future where they weren't defined by absence, by fear, by enemies, but by choice, by love, by family. Hours passed like a gentle balm. The city stirred outside, but inside the safe house, the world felt smaller, contained, warm. Dominic sat close, one hand on the baby, the other brushing against hers, silent but present. They didn't need words. The bond was undeniable, forged in danger, regret, and finally redemption. She leaned her head against his shoulder, heart finally unclenching. "We made it," she whispered. "All of us." He pressed his forehead against hers, eyes closing briefly. "We did," he said softly, "and we'll keep making it. Every day." The baby stirred again, tiny fingers curling around both their hands, a simple gesture that carried the weight of everything: trust, love, survival. She realized then that they had not only survived the night, but they had survived themselves, their regrets, and their past. And now, together, they could begin the life that had once seemed impossible. Dominic pulled her close, holding her with a tenderness that made the world outside disappear. "We're a family now," he said, voice low, firm, but full of emotion. Nothing can take that from us. She rested her head against his chest, tears flowing freely. The first real tears of relief and joy she had shed in years. A family, she whispered. Yes, a family. And as the morning light filled the room, warming their faces, the three of them, father, mother, and child, sat together, fragile yet unbreakable, knowing that whatever storms came next, they would face them as one. Because love, redemption, and the choices made in the darkest nights could create a life more powerful than fear, more enduring than regret, and infinitely more beautiful than any empire. And as they sat there, bound by survival and newfound trust, she knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. If you felt the emotion in their journey, the love, the danger, and the redemption, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like theirs, because some stories aren't just told, they're felt.